Hello everyone, welcome to the SNC podcast, a show helping you better understand the intriguing world of music, arts and entertainment through insightful discussions with African artists, creatives and executives. I am your host, Folashade Anozie. Happy New Year. I hope your 2023 is off to a fantastic start. Wishing you peace and success in all that you're working on this year. Kicking off the first episode of the new year is my chat with Lola Shoneyin, an award-winning British-Nigerian author and poet. Lola's works include 3 books of poems, So All the Time I Was Sitting on an Egg, Song of a Riverbird, and For the Love of Flight, as well as 3 children's books, Mayowa and the Masquerades, Do As You Are Told Baji, and Iyaji the House Girl. Her debut novel, The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives, was nominated for the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2011 and went on to win the PEN Oakland 2011 Josephine Miles Literary Award and Ken Saro-Wiwa Prose Prize. The novel was adapted for a one-woman show, stage play, BBC radio play, and in 2020, it was announced it would be adapted into a Netflix original series. Lola Shoneyin is also the founder of Ouida Books, a publishing house, and Ouida, a bookstore, cultural and co-working space. In 2012, she founded Book Buzz Foundation, an NGO dedicated to promoting literacy, creating reading spaces, and organizing cultural and arts-focused events, including Ake Arts and Book Festival, a prominent literary festival on the African continent. Hello, Ms. Shoneyin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
How is your 2023 looking thus far?
It's looking good. Yeah, lots of books in the offing, lots of exciting projects. So I'm really looking forward to this year and looking forward to seeing how it pans out.
I wish you immense success with everything you're going to do. I'm happy to have you here because a lot of people on the continent are lovers of books and bookstores. And obviously, who better to talk to about the process of turning that love into a business than yourself. But before we get into that part of the conversation, I want to talk briefly about your background because a lot of people listening may not know that you are the last born of 6 children and you're also the only girl. Right? So can you talk briefly about how your childhood and upbringing influenced your love of books?
So I don't know how much it had to do with being the only girl, the only daughter coming after 5 boys, but I think what influenced me and the fact that I'm a writer today and that I love books so much is probably going to boarding school at age 6. So my parents flew me out of Nigeria and I landed in a boarding school called Cargerfield in Edinburgh in Scotland. It was very cold. And it was of course difficult at first with the culture shock. But they had certain rules around reading. So for instance, after lunch every day, we had to read for 45 minutes. Everybody in the school, everyone had to go to the library, pick out a book, sit down and read in silence for 45 minutes. So we did that every day, every weekday. And going to bed, you would always have 15 minutes to read before lights out. So again, it was just part of what we did. And then another thing that I loved was the fact that our teachers would read to us. So if they said, one of my favorite books was The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole. And the teacher would say, if you hurry up and do your work, then I'll read to you at the end of the lesson. So sometimes it was 5 minutes, sometimes it was 3 minutes, but everybody would speed through their work just so they could listen to her reading, this book. And of course we were maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I loved listening. I still love people reading to me. And I love reading to people as well. So I think that's where the love came from. It was just part of my life, to the point where to the extent that I didn't think it was anything special to love books and to read voraciously.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, just to move on to your decision to start a bookstore. A lot of people love books. It doesn't mean that they should start a bookstore because it's hard. So can you talk about when that light bulb went off in your head to say, okay, I love books and I want to start a bookstore?
I'm one of those people who's always loved bookstores, and you can just leave me in a bookstore and go. I can spend hours there wandering around looking at books. I love the look of books. I love looking at covers. I love analysing covers, possibly because I studied media. So when I look at everything sort of to do with books, physical books, I'm constantly analysing. So there wasn't a light bulb moment. There was a light bulb moment about kind of embarking on the process of actually having a bookstore, but it was more necessity than anything else. So I'll tell you how it happened. I would buy loads of books for Ake Festival, and we will ship all those books to Abeokuta for the festival, set up bookstores there, and after Ake Festival we'll pack them all up and I'll just go and leave them in my parents' house in Ilishan. So they gave me a room that I could store them. And then there was some flooding, a leak. There was a leak in the roof because it was in the kind of the quarters, and I lost a lot of books. So I was thinking, right, it's either fix this ceiling, the roof, whatever, and keep putting these books there, but who knows how it happened? What if it happens again? So I started thinking, okay, maybe I need to bring my books. I need to warehouse them properly. So it happened around the same time that I was determined to vacate the small kind of one-room office that we had. We were all sharing open plan one room, which is where we ran the festival from. I was thinking we need to move into, a bigger space where people can have different offices and privacy, and especially because we were also now trying to move forward with the publishing house. So I started looking for offices, and as soon as I came into this building and I saw the bookstore, what we call the bookstore bowl now, which is just what's I guess meant to be the living room, the downstairs living room, I just saw bookstore. So it didn't take me long at all to have shelves made and to arrange the books in that space. So the advantage of that, of course, is that when we have books left over from Ake Festival, they always have a home. Yeah. So that's how it came about.
That's a really simple story. Yeah. Because I was thinking that maybe you had to do all this research because just kind of sticking to that point about you came here, why did you choose to have a bookstore in Lagos? Because you could have had the bookstore in Abeokuta.
But I was living in Lagos.
Oh, I see.
I was actually based here. And everybody who knows me knows I have certain rules around, where I live and where I work. I don't work more than 3 kilometers away from where I live. It's kind of like a triangle. Where I live, where I work, where my kids go to school. It's always quite a small triangle to ensure that I can get to each one, because I just don't like commuting.
I think the older you get, you realize how crucial that is. When you're younger, it's easy to say, I want to travel far. Now, so you found this place and you decided to fix it up. In terms of the books that you carry, because in the course of my research, and even just when you go to bookstores, you see that some bookstores carry so many types of books. For you, were you keen to carry different types of books, or were you going to say we have to carry a specific number of books?
I think I wanted to do kind of I wanted to do like serious literature, and I wasn't particularly interested in educational books, which is what you find in a lot of bookstores. Books for school. I wasn't interested in that. I wanted books for people who read for leisure. So from fiction to drama to poetry to all the different genres. I wanted to have them all. We have a whole fiction section and a non-fiction section in the bookstore. And of course we have the other genres as well. And we have how-to books. And we have books around business, around, of course, the economy. We have a whole section on Africa. that's what was important to me. It was also really important to me to try to have a bookstore where people could find books authored by African writers and, books about Africa. So that's kind of the main focus. That is not to say that we don't have other writers, but in many ways I think I like the idea that there's a bookstore that focuses on books that are authored by Black people.
No, I think that's amazing, because when from the YouTube videos that I've seen, and even just going to bookstores outside the country to speak to the owners, some of them talk about one of the challenges as a bookstore owner is that if you carry so many types of books, you end up not selling all of them and then you run at a loss. So it's interesting to know that you were very intentional about the types of books that you were going to carry.
Yeah, I mean, even at Ake Festival, we try and turn things on their head. So when we first started, when we go into bookstores, you find that you have different sections. You have fiction, and then you have world literature, which is where they hide all the African writers, non-white writers, a lot of the time. And so when we had Ake Festival, it was great because nearly all the books that were there were written by African or Black writers. And then we had a world section, which is where we now put the non-African.
turning the table on its head.
Yes, because I thought, in a space where we're promoting, we're celebrating, we're thinking about how we're going to develop creativity on the African continent, I'm not going to box people into a little space. They have to have spaces that they own.
One other question I wanted to ask you, but I think you kind of answered it, was about the layout of the books, how the books are arranged. And when I came last year to buy some books, I was asking one of your staff members that, is it easy for her to find books when customers come in? And she said, oh yeah, because they are arranged by genre. So I wanted to find out, did you play any role in that decision, or you left it to your staff to say, you go?
No, of course I did that. That's the sort of thing that I'm very particular about. So with the fiction, and the arrangement is different. With fiction, it's alphabetical order, and we deliberately go first name and not surname. So you will find, let's say, Ayobami Adebayo, obviously she'll be in A, but she's in A because of Ayobami. So it makes it easier, because that's how people talk about books. It's when you're in academia that people use surnames or refer to authors by their surnames, but regular people just say, I'm looking for a book by, I'm trying to think, like Yejide Kilanko. That's how they think of books, and therefore you'll find Yejide's books in the Y section. Let me just say that what we did was we were thinking of how do we kind of arrange the books in a way that makes it most convenient for people who come into the store. So the fiction is arranged in alphabetical order, but we don't do that with the non-fiction. And that's because sometimes the sections in the non-fiction area are just one shelf long. So if there's a politics shelf, it's just books on politics. We're not looking about the order. If it's sex and gender and race or whatever, you will find those are all kind of mixed up, which is nice as well, because people are then able to kind of look through everything that you have and might find something that they like more than whatever it is that they actually came in to buy. So that's how it's organized. And then we have a children's section. So for me, it's very important, even the way that the children's books are arranged, whereas all the books, you're kind of looking at the spine. When it's adult books, a lot of them is the spine. But with children's books, you want the kids to be able to see the covers. So that's how we've arranged the children's section and the young adult section.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about how the library in law school was. I was just having trauma as you were speaking. Well, that's phenomenal. You've had Ouida for quite a while now. I know that you can speak to this, one of the challenges that bookstore owners speak about is the issue of people now gravitating more to digital books. You have more audiobooks and you have more ebooks. How have you dealt with that? Particularly with a global company like Amazon, people say that it has shut down a lot of small businesses and small bookstores?
So we recognize that you now have electronic books and audiobooks means that there is a considerable share of the market that we've had to cede to people who enjoy reading reading in the books in those different forms. But I think the people who enjoy reading physical books still enjoy reading physical books. And if they're anything like me, for instance, I will have an audiobook of a book, I will have the ebook on Kindle, and I will also have the physical book. Don't ask me why, but I just kind of, when I really like a book, I just want it. I just want to have it. I want to own it in that way. There is a concern, especially now that we know that Amazon is also kind of creeping into Africa. There is a concern that it will kill the smaller bookstores, especially because they can be so much more flexible with prices. But I also know that it's not going to be as easy as they think it is. I'm looking forward to how they're going to come into the market on the African continent, especially with regard to West Africa. I'm trying to see how they're going to make that work, because there's going to be obviously huge amounts of warehousing involved. And the other answer to the question, I think, is we are very good with our pricing. We try as much as possible to pass on the discounts. So during Ake Festival, for instance, where we know we have lots of people coming from all over the continent to buy books, we often sell our books at a loss, and we do that deliberately because we just want them to be accessible. So where we can make up for that is the fact that we are also publishers. So we can gain a little on our own books and ensure that people can still access some of the more expensive books that we bring into the country. With regard to the other forms of writing, we've actually also tried to engage African readers by establishing or developing the One Read app, which we developed in collaboration with Sterling Bank. And the whole idea of it was to have an app that made it easy for people to access books written by Africans. And that became important because when we started this business, especially the publishing, we realized how unenthusiastic publishers, especially publishers in the West, are to giving African writers, African publishers, the rights to books by African writers. And I found it so demoralizing, and it was a battle that I had to fight on many fronts.
Why do you think that is?
It's a commercial decision. I mean, they want to have complete control, but it's also it's also unjust though, and that's the point that I was making. A UK publisher will sell the rights to an American publisher. An American publisher is also America's an English-speaking market. So is Nigeria. An English-speaking, English is our official language. Why can't you give me the rights? If you can give it to America, another American publishing house, sell the rights to them, why can't you sell the rights to me in Nigeria? So it's a fight that's been a kind of tug of war that has been on for some time, and I am pretty sure that we will reach the point where it will become very embarrassing for them to withhold those rights. And I have gone back and forth with quite a few of the major, especially the big publishers in the UK especially. They are the ones that don't want to give up those rights, but with everything that we're doing, we're hoping that they will be shamed into giving them up. But bear in mind also that when Amazon comes into the picture, it brings another whole dimension to the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. A friend of mine raised that same point that you made. Was it last year? No, 2021. She raised that point and she's trying to do something about that. I don't know how far she's going to take that. And to your point about Amazon and how it's disrupting the markets, both in the West, and let's see how it's going to play out in Nigeria. I don't know if you came across this article. It talked about, I read it recently, it's what we can learn from Barnes and Noble's turnaround. I don't know if you've seen that article.
I haven't.
Okay, I'll share it. Yeah. The author talked about, I think his name is Ted Joya. He talks about how Barnes and Nobles is having a positive turnaround. And the CEO, I guess, came from the UK to America. Yeah. And he mentioned some points that I wanted to just like highlight. He said the reason why the company is doing well now is that they're refusing to discount books because you're saying that they have no value. They don't do book promotions. They refuse to take promotional money from publishers because it says once you do that, you're already entrapped. You're forced. Exactly.
You're trapped,
yeah. He says that he also gives power to staff at stores to let them decide what books should be
to promote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if the book isn't selling, they take it off.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that the key, one of the interesting ones is that he says we create an environment in bookstores that's intellectually satisfying.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. That's why we have our workspace that, which is right next to the bookstore, but also the cafe. So you can come to the bookstore, sit, have a coffee, come with your kids. They can look at the children's books. You create an environment that people want to come to. And that for me is the most beautiful part of running a bookstore. It's seeing people come in, liking like the serenity, it's quiet, it's peaceful, and if you're a book lover, being surrounded by books it's very satisfying. So I totally hear what he said. Obviously, we simply don't sell the numbers. We're just one Ouida. We don't have the numbers we don't cater to the sorts of numbers that allow us to make those decisions. But we will do sales, for instance, at Christmas. We do kind of bundles and different things as well.
You had mentioned about book publisher, and one of the things that you do is book publishing. For someone who's listening and doesn't know what that means, what does it mean to be a book publisher?
So I think the problem a lot of people have is that they confuse or conflate publishing and printing, and they think it's the same thing, but it's not. So we're a publisher. We outsource our printing. Somebody else does the printing. We don't even really consider ourselves to be printers. We're publishers. And the publishing process involves all the intellectual work that goes into the making of the book. So it's the editing, it's the copy editing, it's design, it's layout, it's looking for a cover, it's choosing all the different elements and making the right choices about all the different elements that make up a book, a physical book. So you're talking to designers and artists and illustrators. You're talking to somebody who's going to do the layout and who's like what they used to call desktop publishing, choosing the fonts for the titles, the subheadings, everything, all of that is involved. That's what publishers do. And of course the editorial aspect of the book, which is very long-winded and takes a lot of patience. So it's also, working with my team to edit books. We take a book and we have a special methodology that we follow at Ouida. So the way that I have trained my editors, and I have two amazing young women who work with me. I have an international rights editor as well as a submissions editor. But when it comes to the books that we publish, we work together and we read the books out from beginning to end. We sit together and they get a feel of the books as well. And of course, what I'm trying to teach them with that is how to be able to hear rhythm in the writing. But also, when you're reading something out, you're very aware of the fact that there are other people around who are listening to you. So it sharpens your editorial chops. You can hear yourself when there's a problem, when there's a problem in the writing, and pick it out and correct it. So we've done that kind of joint process, I think, with 3 or 4 books now. And it works very much for us. In fact, I'm trying to hire 2 interns to come in and see if we can kind of get people involved in who want to understand that aspect of publishing as well.
Okay,
so that's what a publisher does. A printer prints, and that's just to get the right paper, which they arrive at those decisions still in collaboration with The publisher, you say how you want the book to look, and the job of the printer is to produce everything according to your specifications.
You mentioned that you outsourced the book printing. If you had the luxury of having the resource, would you print the books yourself? And I asked that question because there's another article I read. It's talking about theft of books by famous authors. Some guy was hacking into the emails of editors, and he was pretending to be someone's manager, and he would get the copy of the man.
Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also complaints about when you outsource the printing, sometimes within that third party. Exactly.
Yes.
So,
But what are they going to? What's the worst they can do? Okay, they can steal the book and put the ebook out there. Yes, there's that. We do kind of rail against that. We try and make as much noise about it as possible on social media, everywhere. The truth is, with most Nigerians, they don't know. A lot of people, when they are involved in piracy and kind of downloading these illegal copies, they actually don't realize that what they're doing is criminal, but also that it's detrimental to the writers and the whole kind of creative side of things. I mean, if I'm not getting royalties for the work that I put my blood and sweat in, then what the hell? Why am I bothering? So helping them understand also that they're supporting writing when they buy the legal, go to a bookstore, buy the book and, download properly or get a Kindle, pay for it. People become more productive. And if you like reading, you're the one that benefits also in the long run. But there are those risks. But what I can say is that the other risk is that someone will go and kind of print pirated editions of the book that they don't have the rights to print. There's always that fear, that worry that will happen, that concern. But the truth is that costs money as well. And I think with the sort of books that we publish, which is kind of pretty hardcore literary fiction, it's just not the kind of book that lends itself to piracy.
Yeah. What about a book distributor? What does that person do?
So the job of a distributor is to get the books basically from the publishers into the hands of the readers. And we don't have that system at the moment because, okay, for instance, with Penguin Random House in the UK, their distributor is called, or the distributor that they work with, it's two, TBS or GBS. It's called the Book Service or the Grantham Book Service or something like that. With Macmillan, they have MDL. I think the sort of smaller independent bookstores generally either use Hachette or Macmillan or the bigger distributors. So what they do is they're the ones who warehouse the books. I'm the publisher. We've got the book. Here's the book, right? But when those books are printed, they're not coming to me. What am I going to do with them? I finished my job as the publisher. They go to the distributors. And it's the distributors who then, based on the instructions that they're given from the publishers, make sure that those books get to the places. So whether it's stores, other bookstores, whether it's individuals, whether it's other kind of retailers, whether it's a school, once you make that request from the publisher, they basically instruct the distributors, and then the books get shipped out to you.
Thank you for explaining that. What about book imprints? Because I know that Ouida has 3 book imprints, right?
We have more than 3. So we have Tanja Books, which I love. It's from Tangerine. And when you're young, there's a way you say Tangerine. So it's Tanja. So Tanja is the children's imprint. We have Adole, Adole, which is for young adults. It's kind of, not very creative of me. Took it from adolescence. We've got the kind of what we call like the main imprint that we work with, which is Ouida Books. So a lot of our fiction, from Bisi Ajakmo to Adebayo to Isi Osondu to, those authors print under the main Ouida imprint. But then we also have Tivani, for kind of bespoke and vanity publishing. So if you have a book, for instance, that you've got some funding for that just needs, you're looking for somebody to do all the things that we would normally do with the publication, with publishing, we have that imprint which caters to such people. We also have Cognix, which is our non-fiction imprint. So we like to print the sort of non-fiction that they're not kind of strictly educational, but they can augment or enhance the educational experience. That's what determines the books that we publish under the non-fiction imprint. But you do that because it's important. You can there's a way that you can section things, so there might be certain editors are better with certain sort of imprints. It could be that, and you do that as a way of it helps you also be able to look at which books are doing well in the way that they are catering to certain cohorts. So for a long time under Adol, there's a book called Mafoya that we had, which was kind of the only book in that under the Adol imprint, or Adoli. But what we were therefore very keen to have other YA books, which is why we then got the book by Blessing Musariri, All That It Ever Meant, and the book by Ruby Gorka. We wanted to kind of populate that imprint as well, so that when a young person comes in and they say, we're looking for books, and their mom says, no, you can't read books from this particular section, we can say, how old are you? Okay, 12 to 16. Okay, this section, these are all the books that you'll find.
And in terms of, as you wrap it up, what about book publishing? Where do you see that going in terms of the evolution? But are there trends that you're seeing, whether on the continent and globally, that you feel like this is where the future of book publishing is headed?
I think we are in the future. Rather than being able to project books on a white wall, I'm trying to think, where else is it that we can go from here? We have the books in their physical form. We have the books in their electronic form. We have the books in the audio form, I guess. And, of course, we have the books in the forms that cater to people with disabilities. I think that area could definitely be developed to make sure to provide more access for people who cannot access the books in mainstream kind of forms. I think definitely that's needed on the African continent. We need to do more for people living with disabilities. But in terms of the formats that exist now, I'll be interested to see how much we can stretch it. For instance, with audiobooks, first it was just somebody reading. Then they started adding small music and different things. Then they started putting in sound effects. But okay, so where do we draw the line? When does it stop being a novel and start being a radio play, for instance? So I think that people are constantly kind of go back and forth and move in different directions. But I think in terms of the forms that exist right now, there is space for further evolution or seeing how things evolve. But I think we're pretty much, we've got them covered. We've got I saw someone tweet like 2 days ago that, I'm sure you've heard of ChatGPT. It's some open AI software that may allegedly replace Google because it talks to you in a conversational manner, so you can ask it a question and it responds to you like a human. So of course, Google, you can already press the microphone and ask your question. Yeah, but apparently Google is more about lists, but this one is more about speaking to you like a human being, explaining. Yeah, exactly. There's some kinks that they need to work out. So it's in someone said that it's interesting to see how that technology would be used, or that software will be used for, the future of books. How else can it be used? The only advantage in that is maybe there's a word you don't understand, you click on it and it explains the meaning to you, but that you've already been kind of read to in a way through the audiobooks. And to be honest with you, I have to say that I guess I'm old-fashioned because I'm old, and one of the things that I love doing is reading to people, and I really want to go back to just kind of reading to kids, asking them to come in on a Saturday, taking one book and just basically reading it for 2 hours, because I think there's so much that young people gain from listening. I think that's what helps them become better listeners when they're older. It's kind of great practice to be able to listen to someone reading. You're not watching a play. There isn't much by way of visual stimulation. You're not watching it in a cartoon. It's not animated. This is a human being. We keep saying we're going to do it. I really want to do it. I want to read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to Nigerian children. It was one of the books that I really enjoyed when I was younger, especially because that's what really taught me. That book that was the very basis for understanding description for me, especially characters within the book, within a book. So I love that. Yeah,
that would be a great idea. As you were talking, made me think about Tales by Moonlight. Although, so I was just like, because it's true, like you are really although like, yes, I do agree, you are seeing it on TV, but I guess to your point, it kind of speaks to the issues that parents have or complain about social media and just too many devices. Children have lost the ability to just listen
and imagine. Because that's the thing, when you're listening, you are building the pictures in your mind. You are creating it. And if you have 10 children seated and you're reading to them and you ask all of them to draw the people you've read, the clothes might be the same, but the faces might be different, unless the writer has also been really explicit in describing each character. But that ability to be able to imagine by yourself, it's become like you look for people with that skill, and it's really difficult. And even in the workplace, people struggle with conceptualizing, to bring together a variety of ideas together to make one. That sort of exercise of listening to somebody reading, that's what it teaches you.
As you speak about reading to children, one of the challenges we have is you see that some kids in different environments don't even have access to, talk less of even just being read to. They don't have access to bookstores and libraries. I know you're not the government, but what can be done to help fix that or change that?
Well, I just came from Kenya, and it was great because I went to attend an event where I was representing Sheikh Abdul Al-Kasimi, and I was spending some time with Angela Washuka and Shiro Koinange, who have this initiative called Book Bunk. And what they're doing is that they're modernizing, refurbishing the libraries in Nairobi one by one. And I went to one in the Eastlands Library. I actually did a short film, and I was shocked at first. And I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, I want to know the people who are actually going to this library. Who are they? And we got there at just a little after 8 or 9, and there were people there already reading, studying. And I actually interviewed 3 different people because I wanted to know what they were doing, because I was of the opinion that the idea of libraries was obsolete. We were past it. We were so far gone in the deterioration of not only the physical library, but the idea of it. I couldn't point to one government that was really thinking of investing in libraries as community spaces to support young people. I thought, okay, we're finally in that place where nobody wants to go to a library. People are scared of all sorts of things. So in my mind, I'd started saying, this library thing, I beg, it's probably not going to work. But when I saw it in action, I was just blown away. And the first thing that came to my mind was I started thinking, right, Ileshan, where I'm from, Ileshan Remo, which is where Babcock is, that if these spaces are doing more than just stocking books or putting books on the shelf, they're really important quiet spaces for people to study, to revise, to do their research. And we forget that we live in a very noisy country. From everywhere you walk, from the road, people are shouting, the market, you can't hear yourself think. If you're like me now in my own house, I'm in my bedroom, it's like there's a social club, God knows how long, I'm just constantly hearing music. So there aren't many opportunities for just peace and quiet. to write, to think, to read. So those spaces are still important. And the first thing that came to my mind was going to my hometown or my village, which is Ilishan, which is not a village. That's where Babcock University is. And going there to kind of see what I can do about the library and modernizing it. But I was thinking of doing that as just as an individual. And my idea was to go and talk to other people who have a lot more money than I do, to see if I could raise some funds and kind of populate the library with books, at least buy decent tables that people can sit on, and create a system that allows people to be able to use it, and for the different reasons, and make sure we have damn good internet there, because that was one of the main reasons that people came to that library, to be able to work, but with it, use the internet. So without individuals taking those big projects on, I don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe corporates. I know that the one in Yaba, for instance, GTB has looked at that. I know Sterling Bank has been looking at all sorts of ways to put books in people's hands. But you see, there's help needed, because the state is just simply neglecting to cater to community needs at that level, which is a shame.
Yeah, it totally is, because you're right. You keep on hearing people say that we don't need libraries anymore. But even if you are a university student, if you don't live close to school where your library is, there's a library in your community. You can go there and do your work and do your research. As parents, you can take your children there, also teaching them how to just focus and read and be quiet.
And there's a lot of stuff that you can do in a library. You could play chess. You could have a little room where people can watch movies. You can, educational, or you can just, so that it doesn't become a cinema, you can say it's just documentaries that educate people. You can have writers who come and do readings in the library. There's so many things that can be done. And I was quite embarrassed that I hadn't thought of I wasn't kind of trying to even think beyond just sitting down and looking at a book in a library. And when I saw this library in Nairobi, and it was right next to they call it a Hundumi, I think, which is a community center. And it was very deliberate to build them close to each other. I was reminded of all, what we could do, and how those spaces around the library, because of the facilities you create, you can make it a space that kind of brings the community together. And that's the world we're heading into. Everything now is about building communities.
Now, with the Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives being adapted into an original Netflix series, what are you looking forward to most about the adaptation? And are you going to be coming on as a consultant or co-producer?
I'm not really allowed to talk about it, to be honest with you. But I'm looking forward to a very entertaining series. I'm sure that it's going to be. I'm praying for everyone involved that it is.
Okay.
Because this is Baba Segi is not my book. I've given it to the world, and by the world I generally do mean Africa, because I have been so blessed with the way that African readers have embraced it, and it has become their own story. That's the dream of any writer, I think. So when I think of Baba Segi, yes, I was the one who wrote it, but I kind of think I was just some sort of medium. I was the vessel. It's very much an important African story. We never stop talking about how relevant it is because of the themes of the book, and they keep coming up in our consciousness, like national consciousness, collective consciousness. So it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. And I'm just very grateful to have had a hand in it.
That's fantastic. Thank you for at least saying something. I appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go on to the fun random questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. The first question is, if you had to choose one of the following birds as a pet, which are you choosing? Have an African grey parrot, an African firefinch, or a parakeet?
Why not a Ouida?
Because I felt that, because I know it is, but I was like, let me think of another bird.
Well, actually, I would definitely take the parrot. I have to say, I am so fascinated by the way that parrots have the ability to replicate what humans say. And of course, it's just that response to just being able to, like I say, replicate that sound is something that fascinates me so much. So I'll go for the African parrot.
It's phenomenal. Parrots are amazing. I had one like not too long ago and it just died.
Oh no!
I know.
I'm sorry about
It was just so sad. But yeah, I thought of putting your Ouida, but I was like, that's so obvious.
Yeah, because that's what I would do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Okay,
get you,
exactly. So second question is, what is your favorite movie of all time?
Oh God, this is so. It's probably Gladiator, to be honest. And I know people will say that that's really corny, and I understand, but
No, it's not.
I think it's because of the way it gives me. It's one, I find it adequately sentimental. It makes me cry every time, and the music is just so beautiful. And of course, I love Jimon Honsu in the, and I was really happy to meet him in 20, I think it was 2019, 2020. So I was just looking at him going, oh God.
Gladiator is that movie that, like you said, the soundtrack, the story is phenomenal, and then the soundtrack as well. I saw the movie, I had to go see Lisa Gerrard in concert because I was like, I was so moved by the song. So that's a great choice, man. That's a great choice. Third question is, what was the last song or album you listened to on repeat?
Oh, easy. Last album was Sting. Best of Sting, 25 best songs of Sting. In terms of songs, probably Rush by Ira Starr. I love the song, especially the piano version as well. I love the song.
Okay.
She's like, I love that girl, you know. She's young and I just think she has an incredible future.
She's very daring, and we need women to, you know, more.
And of course, she's another person who I understand is managed by her mom, and I love that. I love that her mom is kind of walking her through the navigating that what can be a very complex world of showbiz.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know that. Fourth question is, what are 2 important things that you have learned about life?
The most important thing, I think, is to spend less, save more. And secondly, being respectful costs nothing. You don't lose anything by being respectful to people, no matter who it is.
No, I agree with you. Final question is, what are 2 books that you would recommend people check out this year?
Wow. Can I do 3?
Yes, you can.
So one, we are publishing, and I'm going to be very selfish here and talk about some of the fantastic books that we're publishing. We are publishing Ayobami Adebayo's new book, A Spell of Good Things. We are publishing Bisi Ajapon's new novel, Daughter in Exile, and we're publishing a book called The 5 Sorrowful Mysteries of Andy Africa, which is just a genius book. You know, it's a debut by a mathematician called Stephen Buoro. So we're very excited about those books, and we have others in the offing as well.
That's amazing. That's great. Yeah. And I have a bonus question, because you talked about how you have left The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives to the world. And I saw this tweet, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? And I said I'm gonna ask you. Credit to the writer is BR Cloth Writes. The question is, they want to turn your book into a movie, but they want to change a few major things in the book, including the title and the ending. As the author, are you taking the contract?
Well, I think it depends on a lot of things, to be honest. Changing the title, I think sometimes if they are making major changes, it's probably safer to change the title, and maybe rather than saying based on, you could say inspired by a book. And there's nothing wrong with that. Stories give birth to stories all the time. If they're paying to do that, and it's still possible to sell the rights for somebody who's going to produce a movie that's very closely mirrors what's in the book, then that might just be another opportunity. I don't know. I try not to get emotional about the different forms that my book is being adapted for, there's only so much time in this world.
Yeah, but it was just very interesting to see the different responses from different authors. Some of them obviously speaking from a legal background, saying that, as long as you're paying for the option, so that you said you have the opportunities to do other things.
I don't want to be too emotionally attached to those things. Honestly, I have so many other things I should be doing and occupying my time with.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Shoneyin, it has been an awesome honor having you here. As we bring it to a close, are there any final words that you'd like to share?
For people especially who want to be writers, let me know if you want me to do a Twitter space so I can start talking to you and telling you the things to look out for. But for those, because I have a feeling it'll be mainly aspiring writers or people within that space who will listen to this, and I think live life so that you have stuff to actually write about. You've got to interact, you've got to have experiences, you've got to experience other people. I mean, a good range of people also. Those are the things I think that feed into really good fiction.
Okay, that's great. And for people who want you to have the Twitter spaces for writers, they can obviously tweet at you at Lola Shoneyin to let you know.
Yeah, let me know on Twitter, let me know on Instagram. I really want to do it because even my staff, I have 2 aspiring writers who work for me, and they are constantly saying, do workshop, Ellis, do workshop, we want to do, and I don't know that I will have the time for a workshop, but I would like to do it. Whatever it is I do, it has to be convenient for me, and I have to be able to fit it into my time.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for your time, ma. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Shade. Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you to Lola Shoneyin. You can check her out on Twitter and Instagram at Lola Shoneyin. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a few minutes to rate us on your favorite podcast platform. It helps the podcast get discovered by more people. Thank you so much. This episode is produced, edited, and mixed by Folashade Anozie. The show is powered by Non-Conform Productions, and our theme song is by John Akinola. You can check out the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TheSNCPodcast. Thank you for listening.